You've asked for the complete press tutorial for FC25. This tutorial is strategically broken down into 5 step-by-step segments. It's right stick switching, reading your opponent, including signals, touch direction and common flows of play, second man press, the run-up switch-off technique, and squeezing opponents off the ball. Now, as a bit of a disclaimer, I know you can activate team press, I know you can activate constant pressure, but as we know, to prevent people from spamming this, EA have minimized the use of this through nerfing the stamina of your players. Hence, this is why I'm making this tutorial, because you need to learn how to manually press your opponent without the utilization of the AI. Now, first up is right stick switching. The reason why this is so important is because the majority of techniques that I'm going to teach you in this tutorial do involve right stick switching. Whether it's reading your opponent, whether it's switching off with the approach and switch off technique, or whether it's switching to multiple defenders at once to utilize the squeezing opponents technique. And to put more proof into the pudding, we're going to jump into the next segment of reading your opponent. You see, there are 3 techniques to read your opponent. It's looking for signals, and that's essentially an attacker situated in front of a defender, showing for the ball as your opponent is building up in your own half. And if you see this signal, it is always a good indication that your opponent will attempt to pass into that attacker, because as we know, your goal in FC25 is to hit the attacker's feet so that you can drag opponents out of their position, so that you can turn and shoot, so that you can activate, or so that you can essentially initiate your attack. And you need to look out for this. If you see a attacker situated in front of a defender, you need to right stick switch towards that defender so that you can then anticipate the opponent, step up and squeeze him. And the reason why reading someone is so important is because you won't be able to initiate the press techniques that I teach later on in this tutorial without knowing how to read someone. Second up, we have touch direction. Now, it's common knowledge. Touch direction, or where the opponent takes the ball first time as their first touch, is always a good indication as to where they will pass nets, and that is how we can read opponents. You need to take notice of what direction your opponent is taking the ball first time so that you can preemptively switch in that direction and cut off any passing options that are available to hence initiate the press. And lastly is common flows of play. You see, as you play this game, as you get to know the mechanics and as you get to know the common flows of play of your opponents, you should be taking notice of what is common in people's attacks. When they come wide, do they look to come into the center, or do they like to keep going wide? When they pass from a winger back to a wing back, do they like to then pass back to the winger to continue the attack up that side, or do they like to switch the play? These are the things you need to notice and take notice of when you are defending in FC25 so that you can stay ahead of your opponent and read him and switch preemptively with the right stick. Next up is second man press. You will not be able to manually press someone without the use of second man press, but as a disclaimer, please limit the use of this technique, because if you abuse it, you will bring players out of position without knowing, and this will hinder your defense. With that being said, that is where right stick switching comes into play, because if you can right stick switch very quickly between your defenders while second man pressing, you won't stay on a single defender, aka second man presser, for long enough for him to run out of his position, because you've already switched off to another defender and it's now second man pressing with another defender. And that is exactly why right stick switching is super important in these techniques. Now, in terms of second man press, another disclaimer, you don't want to abuse it to the point where you're relying on the AI to do the tackling for you. If your second man presser is near the player on the ball, then you need to select manually that defender and get the tackle in manually. Don't rely on the AI. Right, now you got through the nitty gritty, the boring stuff of how to press an opponent. Now we get into the techniques of actually how to squeeze them off the ball and press them off the ball. And that incorporates the run up and switch off technique. The run up and switch off technique is essentially you running up with a defender towards the ball carrier and then switching off the defender nearest to him so that you can then second man press with the initial defender and then run towards the nearest passing option with the second defender that you selected. In doing this, what you're doing is running up in a line with two defenders and cutting off any options that are near the opponent. And this is how you can basically squeeze someone off the ball. Now, this technique is great for when you're on the wing, or even when you're in the midfield when you want to run up between two defenders, either your two centre backs to run up together and not leave a single gap in the defense. Because if you, let's say, run up with one defender, you're going to leave that gap open. But if you run up with the two of them in a line, it prevents you from leaving that gap in the defense. Or maybe it's with your midfielders and you want to keep them in that structure, in that line, your two CDMs. The run up switch off technique is very good at doing that, as well as cutting off any of your opponent's options. And that does bring me into the final segment of squeezing someone off the ball. If you want to be like MS Dosseri in the E-World Cup final and press like no one has ever seen before, then you need to incorporate 3, even 4 defenders into your switching techniques. And that entails the run up and switch off technique, but also switching continuously between all of your defenders, incorporating a 3rd or even a 4th defender to wrap around the opponent as he's building up. So you want to run up and then you want to switch off to the second defender, like the run up switch off technique, and run towards his nearest option, all while holding second man press. Then what you're wanting to do is switch to a 3rd defender and run towards either the space or another passing option. And what this does is it will cause a wall to form around the player on the ball, cutting off any of his options and hence squeezing him off the ball. Now, what did I say at the start? It is a step-by-step tutorial, and I have purposely made these segments in order so that you can implement each technique to get into the harder techniques. And what did I say at the start about second man press? Once that initial defender who's second man pressing the ball carrier gets close to him, you need to reselect him, whether that's with L1 or right stick, and you need to make the tackle. And this usually happens once those two options side by side, and once you've squeezed him off the ball, happens. And usually it's once you've incorporated the 3rd or the 4th defender into that defensive technique. You see, this comes into play especially when you're squeezing someone on the wing with techniques I'm about to teach you, and then you read him to go back and switch the ball. You can preemptively switch across the opposite side to your winger to run straight to the wing back that he's switching to, as an example, to then set up the next line of press on the opposite side. Because if you're too slow, if you're not reading your opponent, if you're not switching preemptively, you won't be able to squeeze him off the ball quick enough. And if you can't do that, it's quite easy to pass around your press. But if you're good at reading, if you're good at squeezing, which I'm about to teach you, then you won't have any trouble with that. So there you have it, a complete guide to pressing in FC 25. If you guys want to learn one-on-one with me, I can teach you guys this. I can also teach you many other things, which I do to my clients, and I take them from the low divisions to the high divisions. Check the link down below. Patreon, work one-on-one with me and join the tight-knit community. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you enjoyed it, you may enjoy this one here.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. And lastly, if you do want any pre-gaming fuel or supplement, then head over to atpscience.com, which is the first link in the description, and use the code DylanEtsATP at checkout to get yourself a discount. Not only is it the cheapest way to get supplements, but it helps me out a ton, guys, so thank you.